Admiral Vaughn reclined in his position of authority, chair with a grin on his face, as the holographic screen sprang to life. The SS image was hung in front of him, a relic, a ship so old that it could as well have existed as a ghost since the beginning of space. In the past, the rusty hull was plagued with time's scars and drifted idly in the emptiness, a remnant of the Galactic Union. For this, the best fleet had been sent out. He was astounded by how ridiculous it was, what the people had left behind. Vaughn laughed as his officers talked to one another, amused looks exchanged, and they all understood why they were present, for a purpose rather than a challenge. "Spectacle," he muttered. "It appears we will be putting this ancient fossil out of its suffering." The voice of Admiral Captain Laurel cut through the bridge's murmur. He stood with his brow furrowed at the tactical station. "Sensors are detecting some odd readings from the ship's systems. There is still power, and it's not completely dead." Vaughn sneered. "Old batteries? I doubt there's anything valuable about that." Laurel kept himself composed and didn't let his eyes stray from the console, tapping his fingertips. "It might be prudent to take precautions. We don't understand the capabilities of this ship." "Are you the one who sharpened Captain Barron's voice?" Vaughn asked, implying that they should be wary of an item for a museum. Laurel paused, obviously assessing his words. "No, sir. I propose that we come with intelligence." The sneer on Vaughn's face disappeared. "We'll prepare and approach it as I see fit." He issued the directive to fire on his command, and the fleet took its place, streamlined and shining in the shadows. Vaughn observed the space background as the targeting systems locked onto a section of the drifting hulk. He imagined the explosion, ripping the old ship apart, turning it into dust and memories. It would be a humorous conclusion to a tedious mission. "Fire!" The cannons roared, pulses exploded with a single ray of energy. Vaughn leaned in the direction of the relic, anticipation tightening within his chest. Yet, rather than the pleasant explosion he anticipated, the rays collided with an imperceptible barrier. The ship evaporated into nothing, still unaffected. Varen mumbled in confusion. "This isn't possible." The bridge crew paused before the second barrage. The blasts were more intense and concentrated on the same spot, yet the beams faded away, in the face of the invisible shield. The old ship appeared to shrug, like rain on a window. Laurel's voice was subdued and strained. "I believe we've underestimated it, Admiral." Vaughn's jaw tightened. What type of protection is millennia? Old? What system might have been operational in the past? The relic stirred. Anyone could respond. The hum began softly, almost imperceptible. But once dormant, it grew louder. The ship now alive, its systems flashing in line one after the other. "Admiral, it's waking up." Laurel's voice carried a hint of worry. "It's powering up." Vaughn's fingers gripped the chair's armrests, fleeting doubt entering his mind. Before he could respond, a dazzling burst of light interrupted him. The relic struck back, releasing a single energy burst that tore through one of the Union destroyers, disintegrating it in an instant. Vaughn looked on as the bridge fell silent, his finest destroyer reduced to rubble, an outcome he hadn't anticipated. He parted his lips, but nothing came out. The arrogant assurance he had displayed before had vanished, replaced with fear. "It's not just a relic," he whispered. Laurel's voice was just above a whisper. "We need to retreat," Vaughn snapped, his voice a cold command. "Return to command, retreat, and reorganize." Even as he spoke, Vaughn was aware that it was too late. The relic was fully awake now, its systems crackling with unimaginable power. Once, this ship had been a force to be reckoned with, but now, it was even more dangerous than everything the Union had ever encountered. The relic moved with unexpected grace, as if centuries of decay hadn't affected it. It reduced the speed of its weapon systems, ancient yet significantly more sophisticated than the Union's contemporary fleet. The relic aimed for the surviving ships with merciless effectiveness. "We must withdraw." Laurel's voice grew more desperate. "Admiral, We must leave this place! Vaughn watched, fists clenched, as another of his ships dissolved in the fire of the Relic's weapons. How could this be happening? Something so ancient and forgotten, yet so incredibly strong. The fleet scrambled to evade another pulse from the Relic. Across space, a dark, foreboding signal reverberated. Not only was it a warship, but a beacon, one that was alerting other ancient ships, far beyond the galaxy. The fate of Vaughn's fleet had been sealed, and possibly that of the galaxy as well. On the flagship's bridge, frightened voices and flashing lights filled the storm of chaos. Admiral Vaughn stood frozen, his eyes focused intently on the holographic screen as the SS Relic continued its ruthless attack. One of his cruisers disintegrated in a brilliant flash. Retreat! Captain Laurel's voice barely made it through. The chaos. His hands hovered over the controls, shaking. We can't endure this. Vaughn tightened his fists. How had this happened? They had been mocking the Relic only moments before. Now, they were fleeing from it. Hold our ground, Vaughn barked. We cannot let this degrade us. But sir, the ship is too powerful, Laurel protested, his face marked with doubt. We need to retreat. Vaughn's eyes blazed with determination. We hold our position. We'll find its weakness. The Relic continued to move, unfazed by their attempts to outmaneuver it. Each of its strikes was deliberate and devastating. It was not just an ancient warship, it was a tool of destruction. The fleet regrouped, focusing all firepower on the Relic's engines, a flurry of lasers and torpedoes converging on the target. For a moment, it seemed as though the Relic faltered, its engines dimming. Vaughn allowed himself a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could reverse the trend. But then, once more, the ship surged with energy, its engines roaring to life with renewed power. It was learning. It was adapting. Laurel's voice trembled with dread. It's absorbing our attacks. Vaughn's jaw tightened. That's illogical. A ship from that time period should be... A fresh warning appeared on Laurel's console. Admiral, we're detecting incoming transmissions from neighboring systems. Vaughn's blood froze. What type of transmissions? Laurel's fingers flew over the console. His face paled. They're awakening other ships. At least 2 more warships like this one. They're converging on our position. For the first time in his career, Admiral Vaughn felt genuine fear. This wasn't just an ancient vessel. This was a fleet-wide nightmare, a warship built to destroy everything in its path. We must leave now, Laurel pleaded, his tone desperate. Vaughn's knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrests. He had no choice but to order the fleet to retreat, but it was already too late. The Relic's electromagnetic pulse had crippled the flagship's systems, trapping them in place. The massive shape of the SS Relic loomed closer, its weapons still flashing. Vaughn sensed the air growing heavy with dread. Laurel's voice was barely audible. Sir, we're finished. Vaughn remained silent, his eyes fixed on the vessel that had shattered his arrogance and destroyed the Union's finest. His thoughts raced, but there was no escape. The SS Relic had arrived, and it was unstoppable. Laurel gazed at the deceased, regulating his pulse in front of him. Around him, the thumping in his ears. Except for the faint hum, the bridge was eerily quiet. Emergency systems hummed, barely maintaining power. The powerful Galactic Union. Spacecraft was alive, but the crippled flagship lay in the shadow of the SS Relic, an ancient monster. It grew bigger every second, with archaic systems glowing like eyes. Seeing their pre-admiral, "We must plan," Lura muttered, even though he was certain they were unable to avoid the Union's best fleet. Their flagship was destroyed, and now they were helpless, trapped in the Relic's grasp. He stood with his hands clasped near the viewport, jaw tightened behind his back. The burden of his failure hovered over him. His voice was pressed down like a vice. When it did arrive, Hollow was there. We are powerless to stop it. Laurel's heart sank. Moreover, he had never heard of such a loss. In the voice of his commanding officer, Vaughn had consistently served as the personification of assurance and authority. But now, the man was quiet as they gazed into the abyss. Laurel advised stepping forward, because you can't just quit. There must be something going forward. They were silent for a prolonged period before Vaughn turned, his phrase almost unrecognizable. "Do you know what?" he said in a quiet voice. "That ship is..." It's a legacy of not merely outdated human technology, but of a conflict we are unaware of, from a culture we've forgotten. It was constructed so that we would never intended to resist. But Vaughn's eyes sharpened. "You know it's finished, Captain." Laurel felt a sharp pang, much like a wave of rage rising in his chest. His voice tightened. "So, what are you going to do? Watch it break us apart and let it ruin us?" Vaughn separated his face from his hands. "There is nothing to observe," he said, his face hardening. Before Laurel could contest, the ship's quiet system came alive, piercing the tight atmosphere with a single heartless voice filled with the Galactic Union's order. "Stand down," the voice declared. Lel's blood ran cold. The voice was clearly human, cool, collected, and tranquil. Disengaged. He looked at Vaughn, who had gone pale. "It sounds like it's speaking to us," Laurel stated. Vaughn appeared incredulous but didn't reply. The truth of their situation was frozen, in place, as circumstances descended further into the abyss of the Relic. This old, hideous vessel was providing an order to them. Laurel hurried to the comm station, his hands shaking. "This is Captain..." He turned on the system. "The Galactic Union flagship," Laurel remarked, straining to maintain a steady tone. "Our systems are down, and we are not armed." A long, drawn-out silence followed, every second stretching with excruciating strain until the voice returned. "Oops, you shot at the Relic."